This story was told to me by my father's friend, who used to work as a night caretaker at Highgate Cemetery. I remember him telling it one evening when I was younger, and the way he described everything, it never really left me. He wasn't the type of person to make things up or exaggerate. He spoke about it like it was just another part of his life, like something that happened, and that was it. But there was one thing he said at the beginning that always stuck with me. He told me that working there after midnight didn't feel like being alone, and that whatever was inside the cemetery at that hour knew he was there. I do not tell this story because I want attention. I do not tell it because I enjoy thinking about it. I tell it because it still feels unfinished in my head, like something started that never fully stopped. I worked a temporary night caretaker job at Highgate Cemetery in London for a little over 3 weeks. I had been between jobs at the time, and a friend of mine knew a maintenance supervisor who needed someone to cover the late shifts until a permanent hire started. The job description was simple enough: lock the gates after closing, patrol the paths, check for vandalism, make sure no one was sneaking in after dark, and call it in if anything looked wrong. It sounded boring, which was exactly what I wanted. Highgate Cemetery is one of those places people talk about in a half-joking, half-serious way. Everyone knows it as one of the most famous graveyards in the world, with the old stonework, the overgrown paths, the Gothic tombs, and the catacombs. People go there during the day for tours, architecture, history, and all the usual reasons tourists go anywhere that has become famous for being old and eerie. At night, though, it was different. At night, it felt less like a historical site and more like a place that had decided it no longer wanted visitors. The first time I walked the grounds after closing, I remember being surprised by how fast the atmosphere changed once the public was gone. During the day, there were people, voices, camera shutters, tour groups, birds, and all the ordinary signs of life. After the gates were shut and the last guide left, the place became so quiet that I could hear my own breathing under the hood of my jacket. The cemetery is divided in a way that makes it feel like two different places. The newer sections are still neat enough in places to feel maintained, but the older parts are crowded with leaning stones, cracked angels, iron fences eaten by rust, and pathways that disappear under roots and moss. The trees crowd in close. The shadows between graves become black enough that your flashlight feels weak no matter how bright it is. The supervisor who trained me, a man named Malcolm, gave me my routine on my first night. He was the kind of man who talked to you like he was short on time even when he was not. He handed me a radio, a ring of keys, a flashlight, and a laminated sheet with a map of the grounds. 3 loops, he said. One at 10:30, one at midnight, one at 2. Lock the west gate by 10. Don't let anyone in. If you see anyone inside after hours, tell them to leave once. If they don't, call it in and do not try to play hero. I asked him if people came in often. He looked at me like I had asked whether rain was wet. More than they should, he said. Teenagers mostly. Drunk sometimes. People looking for a thrill. Tourists who don't read the signs. You'll get used to it. Then he pointed at the map and tapped the older section near the western side. Stay out of that part, unless you have to. Especially after midnight. I asked him why. He shrugged in a way that did not answer the question. Old part of the cemetery has bad footing, he said. If you break your ankle in there, I'm the one who has to deal with it. That was the official explanation. I could tell it was not the real one. I did not push. I just nodded, took my keys, and started my first shift. The first several nights were exactly what I had expected. I walked the loops, checked the gates, listened to the radio crackle in my hand, and tried not to think too much about where I was. The cemetery had its own sounds, leaves shifting in the trees, water dripping from stone ledges, the occasional rustle of an animal in the brush. Once I heard what I thought was a fox. Another night, it may have been a cat. Whatever it was, it ran across the path and vanished into the dark so quickly I barely saw it. By the 4th night, I had settled into the rhythm of the place. At least, that was what I thought. The first thing I noticed that felt strange was how often I found the same gate latch unlocked. It sounds small, but it bothered me because I knew I had locked it. Not, I think I locked it. I knew I had locked it. The west gate in particular had a metal latch that made a distinct clank when it dropped into place. I remember hearing it each time. But on 2 different nights, when I came back around on my 2nd or 3rd loop, I found that same latch sitting loose again, as if someone had lifted it with care. At first, I assumed it was old hardware, maybe a bad fit. I told Malcolm about it the next morning. He barely looked up from the clipboard in his hand. "Could be settling," he said. "I'll have someone check it." "Maybe the lock is damaged," I said. He gave me a tight, annoyed look. "You're not here to invent problems. You're here to report them." That was the end of the conversation. The second strange thing happened on the sixth night, just after midnight. I was on the north path near a row of older crypts when I heard footsteps behind me. They were not loud. That was the problem. They were soft, slow, and careful, like someone trying not to be heard. I stopped walking and turned around with my flashlight raised. Nothing. The path behind me was empty, just stone, leaves, and shadow. I stood there for a few seconds, listening. There was no movement. No voices. No footsteps. Nothing. Then I kept going, telling myself I had heard my own shoes echoing off the stone, or that some animal had moved in the brush. But about 30 seconds later, I heard it again. Footsteps. This time they sounded farther back, as if whoever it was had stopped when I turned. I shone my light down the path and saw only the trunks of trees, old monuments, and the low tangled growth around the graves. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. I heard the sound one more time, and then it stopped completely. I stood there long enough to feel embarrassed for being nervous. I checked the radio, which was still working fine, and kept walking. That was when I noticed something else. There was a fresh bouquet of flowers at the base of a tomb I had passed twice already that night. I knew it had not been there before because I had looked at that tomb earlier in the shift. It had been bare stone then. Now there were white lilies laid neatly against it. I remember shining my light across the inscription and feeling my skin tighten. The flowers looked recently placed. They were still crisp, not wilted at all. No card, no ribbon, no sign of who had left them. I told myself a visitor had probably dropped them during the day and I had missed them. But something about the arrangement felt too deliberate, too neat, almost ceremonial. I took a picture on my phone and sent it to Malcolm the next morning, asking if anyone from the grounds crew had left them there. He wrote back one word, "No." After that, the place stopped feeling empty. I do not mean that in a poetic way. I mean that I began to feel the difference between being alone and being unaccompanied. You know that feeling when you are in a room by yourself and you are completely certain you are the only person there? That was gone. By the end of my second week, I started hearing sounds that made no sense. A click of metal from somewhere far off. A whisper that might have been wind if the air had been moving at all. A low, dragging sound near the old section on the west side, like something heavy being pulled over stone. Several times I caught myself looking over my shoulder because I thought I saw movement just at the edge of my flashlight beam. The worst part was that nothing ever came close enough to prove itself. It was always a shape that was not quite a shape, a sound that cut off when I turned toward it. A shadow that could have been a tree branch, except there had not been any branches in that direction. The radio never picked anything up except static and Malcolm's voice when I checked in at the scheduled times. Even then, his voice sounded distant and tinny, as if it were coming from very far away. "Status," he would say. "Clear," I would answer. "Keep moving." That was the entire relationship. On the 11th night, I made a mistake. It was a small mistake, but it changed everything that came after. I was halfway through my midnight loop when I saw that the inner door to one of the maintenance sheds was open. That was not supposed to happen. I had personally locked that shed at 10:30 after getting a replacement battery for my flashlight. I remembered the latch because it had stuck on me for a second. I had to push it down with my palm. Now the door was hanging open a few inches. At first I thought maybe I had not shut it properly, but when I pulled it open, I saw that the lock was still in place. It had not been forced. The latch had simply been lifted from the inside. I stepped into the shed and swept my flashlight across the small room. Rakes, a rolled hose, a stack of bags of soil, a folding chair. Nothing else. Then I saw wet footprints on the concrete floor. They were small, not child-size exactly, but narrow. Barely visible except where the light caught them. They led from the back wall toward the door. I followed them with my eyes. And that was when I realized the back wall had a narrow access panel built into it. It was old, painted the same dark green as the shed, and I had never noticed it before. It stood slightly ajar. I do not know why I did not leave immediately. Curiosity, maybe, or the stupid confidence of someone who has never yet had a reason to panic. I reached out and pushed the panel open. Behind it was a narrow stone passage sloping down into darkness. I just stood there staring. I had no memory of that passage being on the site map. I knew the cemetery had catacombs and underground structures in certain sections, but this was in the middle of a maintenance shed. It did not fit. It did not make sense. I called Malcolm. He answered on the third ring. "Yeah? There's a passage," I said. "Behind the maintenance shed near the west side." Silence. Then, "Close it." "I'm serious."
Malcolm.
"It goes underground."
Is that you?
I said, "Close
Yes,
it."
it's
"You
me."
knew about this?" He did not answer me immediately. When he did, his voice had changed. It had gone flat in a way that made me sit up straighter. "Is the panel open?" he asked. "Yes." "Did you go in?" "No." "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Then shut it and leave the area." I heard something in the background over the radio. It sounded like his office door opening, then closing again. "What is it?" I asked. "Nothing you need to worry about. I'm already worrying about it." "Close it," he repeated. Now. There was something in the way he said it that finally made my skin crawl. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Like he was not telling me to stay away from a dangerous place. Like he was telling me not to let something out. I shut the panel and locked the shed behind me with shaking hands. When I got back to the main path, I looked over my shoulder and saw, for just a second, that the shed door was open again. I stopped. The door was moving slightly in the wind, or so I told myself. I raised my flashlight and took 3 steps back toward it. Then I saw the shape standing behind the screen door. I did not see a face. I did not see clothes clearly. I saw only the outline of a person standing motionless inside the narrow strip of light from my flashlight, the head tilted slightly forward as if it had been watching me from behind the mesh. My breath caught hard in my throat. I remember that vividly because it felt like something physically grabbed my chest. I shouted, "Who's there?" The shape moved away from the door in a single smooth motion, not walked. Moved. I ran forward and yanked the door open, but the shed was empty. Empty, except for a smell that hit me the second I stepped inside. Earth. Damp stone. And something else underneath it. Something stale and sweet and wrong, like old flowers left too long in a closed room. I backed out of the shed so fast I nearly fell. When I got to the main gate, I called Malcolm again. This time, he did not answer. I called twice more. Nothing. The line went straight to voicemail. I should have left after that. I know that. I should have told him the shift was done and driven home and never come back. But I was young and embarrassed and trying to convince myself I had seen some local loiterer in the shed before they ran off. That was the story I settled on as I kept walking the route. A trespasser. A prank. Something normal. The problem was that the rest of the night made that explanation impossible. Around 1:30, I found the flowers again. Not at the tomb where I had seen them before. This time, they were placed on a grave near the east path, one I had definitely walked past less than an hour earlier. White lilies. Fresh, perfectly arranged. And, beside them, something that made my stomach drop so fast, I had to put a hand against the stone to steady myself. A strip of paper with my name written on it. Just my first name. No message. No signature. Just my name. I looked around so fast my flashlight beam spun across the trees and monuments. The cemetery was still empty. Still silent. I grabbed the paper and turned it over in my hand. The back was blank. The ink was smeared a little, as if whoever had written it had done so recently. My first thought was that one of the workers was messing with me. Then I remembered Malcolm's face when I asked about the passage. He had not looked surprised. He had looked annoyed that I had seen it. I stared at the note until my hands started to shake. That was when the radio crackled. For a second I thought Malcolm had finally answered, but instead I heard a sound so soft I almost dismissed it as static. Breathing. Not mine. There was a slow inhale, then the faintest exhale right in my ear. I ripped the radio away from my face and held it out in front of me. The speaker hissed. Then, through the static, I heard a voice. Not Malcolm's. Not a stranger's either. It sounded old. Dry. Very close. You came down here. I dropped the radio. I wish I could say I stayed composed and found some rational explanation for that. I did not. I turned and ran. I ran past graves I had walked by every night without problem, and now they looked different. The darkness between them seemed thicker, more crowded. My flashlight jittered wildly in my hand. The path ahead narrowed. Branches clawed at my shoulders. I heard something moving behind me, not fast, but steadily, as if it already knew exactly where I was going. Then I heard my own name, not through the radio. From somewhere in the cemetery. Quiet. Clear. I froze so hard, I almost lost my footing. There was no way to tell where the voice had come from. It could have been behind me, to my left, ahead of me. It came from all sides and nowhere at once. I turned my flashlight toward the sound and caught sight of a figure standing between two monuments about 20 feet away. It was tall and thin, dressed in something dark. I could not make out any features, but it was facing me. It did not move. I shouted again, "Who are you?" The figure did not answer.
Who's there?
I took one step backward, then another. The figure was suddenly closer, not running. Not appearing in a cinematic jump, just closer. The distance between us had changed by perhaps 10 feet in the space of a single blink. That is what my brain remembers. I do not know how else to describe it. I saw where it had been. I looked away for less than a second. I looked back. It had advanced. I dropped the flashlight. The beam rolled across the grass and lit a row of graves at an angle. For a split second, I saw the figure perfectly in that light. It was not wearing a face. I mean that literally. There was skin, or something that looked like skin, but no features where a face should have been. No eyes. No mouth. Just a smooth, pale oval where a human face belonged. I do not remember screaming, but I must have, because when I found my voice again, it was already breaking. I ran in the dark. I ran until I crashed into a stone wall and split my palm open on the edge. I kept going anyway. I could hear something behind me, but I could not bring myself to look. The cemetery was a maze at that hour. Every path looked familiar until it was not. Every turn led me deeper into the older part of the grounds. Then I saw light, a security light near the west entrance. Relief hit me so hard I nearly laughed. I ran toward it and found the gate wide open. Wide open. The lock was hanging from one side, but it had not been cut. It was simply unlatched. The chain that should have been looped through the gate had been pulled aside, and the iron door stood open toward the street. I stopped dead. The outside road was empty. No cars, no people. Just darkness beyond the gate and the weak yellow light over the entrance. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Level, controlled. Coming down the path I had just fled, I did not turn around. I bolted through the gate and ran straight into the road, my heart pounding so violently I thought it might force me to my knees. I made it to my car, fumbled the keys twice, got the door open, and locked myself inside. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely start the engine. I looked up through the windshield, expecting to see someone standing at the gate. No one was there, no movement. No figure. Nothing. I drove until I was 20 minutes away before I pulled over and threw up in a parking lot behind a closed shop. I called Malcolm from there. He answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" he asked. His voice was so calm, it made me angry. "What the hell is wrong with that place?" I yelled. "There's something in there. You knew there was something in there." Long silence. Then he said, "Did you see the west path?" "Yes." "Did you go down the passage?" "No." Another pause, longer this time. Then he said, "Good." I remember gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles hurt. "What do you mean, good?" His next words still make my stomach turn. "Because if it knows your name, it means you were close enough for it to notice you." I laughed then, but only because I could not believe what I was hearing. It was a hysterical, ugly sound. "What are you talking about?" he sighed, not like a man exhausted by work, like a man tired of repeating himself. "Listen to me carefully," he said. Do not come back tonight. Do not talk to anyone else about this. And if you see anything following you home, do not let it inside." Then the line went dead. I sat in my car in the dark parking lot with the phone still pressed to my ear for almost a minute before I finally lowered it and looked around. For a moment, I thought I saw someone standing across the lot by the dumpster. Then I realized it was just a post. I drove home with the doors locked and every light in my apartment on when I got there. I barely slept. Every sound in the hall outside my door sounded like footsteps. Every shadow in my room looked like it was moving. I quit the job the next morning over text. Malcolm did not argue. He just replied with one word, "Understood." I thought that was the end of it. It was not. 3 days later, I found a folded piece of paper under my apartment door. I had been home all evening. No one had knocked. No one had rung the buzzer. I lived on the 4th floor of a building with a working intercom, and the front entrance had a lock that required a key fob. The paper was old, damp at the edges, and smelled faintly of earth. Inside was a single line written in blue ink. "You left too soon." I called the police, but by the time they came, there was nothing else to show. No sign of forced entry. No one on the cameras. The officer took the note, glanced at it, and said it might have been a prank. He asked if I had any enemies. I said no. I did not know what else to say. After that, things got worse in small ways. The kind of ways that make you doubt yourself. I would wake up in the night and hear a soft tapping at my bedroom window, even though I lived too high for anyone to reach it. I would find the apartment door unlocked after I knew I had locked it. Once, in the kitchen sink, I found dirt under the drain strainer. Dark, wet dirt that looked exactly like soil from a grave. I stopped sleeping properly after that. I started drinking too much coffee just to keep my nerves flat. I checked every window before bed. I kept every light on. Still, I kept hearing something in the hall outside my apartment at night, a slow drag of movement that would stop the moment I looked through the peephole. A week after I quit, Malcolm called me. I almost did not answer. When I finally did, he sounded tired in a way I had never heard before. "You should have told me the second time you heard footsteps," he said. I went cold. "What?" He exhaled through his nose. "You heard them before you saw the shed, didn't you?" I did not answer. "Did it say anything to you?" he asked. My mouth had gone dry. "What is it?" He was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then he said very softly, "We don't know." I laughed once, a bitter little sound. "You work there and you don't know?" "I work there because someone has to." "Someone has to do what?" He did not answer that either. I could hear something faint behind him. Wind, maybe, or something moving against a wall. Then he said, "Listen to me. When it starts using your name, it is trying to get your attention. That is all. Do not answer it. If you hear knocking, do not open the door. If you hear crying, do not follow it. And if you ever smell fresh flowers where there should not be any." He stopped. "What?" I asked. But he had already hung up. I never heard from him again. Months passed. I moved. I changed jobs. I tried to build a normal life around the idea that maybe I had just had a bad run of stress, a few nights of sleep deprivation, and a supervisor who believed in superstitions. I wanted that explanation to be true. I wanted there to be a sensible answer for the way that cemetery had felt and the things I had seen. But there was one detail I never managed to explain away. A photo. When I cleaned out my old phone, I found the picture I had taken of the flowers on the first night I noticed them. I had forgotten it was there. I almost deleted it without looking until I zoomed in on the image and saw something I had missed at the time. At the edge of the frame near the tomb, there was a dark shape between two graves. Not a person exactly, more like the suggestion of one. And if you enlarged it enough, it looked like it was facing the camera. I stared at that picture for a long time before I realized the worst part. The flowers in the photo were not around the grave. They were on top of it. Right on top of the engraved name. My name. I deleted the image after that. Then I deleted the entire phone backup. I wish I could tell you that made me feel better. It did not. The last thing happened 6 months later. I had almost managed to stop thinking about Highgate every day. Not completely, but enough to function. Enough to sleep. enough to pretend I had left the worst of it behind. Then, one night around 2010 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. There was no text at first, just a video. I almost did not open it. I wish I had not. The video was dark and shaky, clearly filmed on a phone. It showed a narrow path between old graves. The camera moved slowly forward, as if the person filming was walking. I recognized the place immediately. The leaning stones, the iron fencing, the overgrowth, Highgate. At first, the only sound was breathing. Then the person filming whispered, "Hello." The camera kept moving. A second later, a voice answered from somewhere just out of frame. It was mine. Not a recording of me speaking, not a voice that sounded similar. It was my voice, clear enough to recognize, saying softly from the dark, "You came back." I dropped the phone so fast it hit the floor and skidded under my bed. I did not pick it up until morning. The video was gone, no trace of it in my messages. No record of the number, nothing. I checked every app, every folder, every call log. There was nothing there. I never found out who sent it. Maybe no one did. I still do not know what happened in that cemetery. I do not know what was in the old passage under the shed, or why Malcolm spoke about it like it was something that noticed people, or why my name ended up on a note in a place I should never have been able to hear about from whatever was inside that grounds after midnight. I only know that on that last night, when I ran out through the west gate, something followed me all the way to the edge of the road. And I know, because I have heard it since, that it did not stop there. Sometimes late at night, when the apartment is quiet and the city sounds are far enough away to seem unreal, I still hear it, not footsteps. Not knocking, just a soft, patient sound from somewhere nearby, like flowers being set gently onto stone. And every time I hear that, I think of the same thing. That place is still there. The graves are still there. The paths are still there. And whatever learned my name that night is still waiting somewhere in the dark, as if it never really wanted me to leave at all.